Hello, and welcome to another edition of SME Media Webinar. I'm Steve Plum, Senior Editor of Manufacturing Engineering Magazine, and will serve as the moderator. Our topic today is lean manufacturing, or more specifically, augmented lean and why moving from industrial automation to worker augmentation can be successful frontline operations. The webinar is sponsored by Tulip, which was spun off by MIT in 2017 to help companies equip frontline workers with the tools to improve productivity, quality, and efficiency. Tulip has received numerous industry awards, including Frost & Sullivan's Entrepreneurial Company of the Year, and was recognized as a World Economic Forum Global Innovator. Now it's time to turn things over to our presenter, Trond Unheim, Tulip's lead ecosystem evangelist. Described as a futurist, Trond has authored 6 books on technology, business, and society, holds a PhD in artificial intelligence and the future of work, and in his spare time is a columnist on manufacturing for Forbes. He's also an accomplished podcaster and webinar presenter. So without further ado, Trond, take it away.
Thanks, Steve. So I thought we would kick it off just talking about, the challenges that I see today, and I'm hoping to get some input from you guys in the audience. And then I'll explain what we think is the recommended approach, augmented lean. And then we'll discuss a little bit how to actually make this operational, and maybe I'll hear from you how you think you can work with this framework in your daily work. So let's jump straight into it. Lean manufacturing means different things to everyone. That is part of the success of the concept, right? To some people, it simply means whatever Toyota is doing because, that's sort of how it started. But to others and to many consultants, it is a fairly systematic framework to eliminate waste, or it can be a focus on value stream. But certainly the focus is always on productivity and definitely on value. But I think, as I'm going to show you, at least in our conception of lean, it also has a very big focus on workforce. So yes, there is the idea that we are trying here to create value for customers and reduce waste, but there's also an enormously strong workforce component. Just wanted to say that outright, because when it comes to the state of manufacturing, before I state what all the challenges are, let's see what you guys think they are. We want to know, is it supply chain delays? Is it, on the workforce side, hiring or training that is the biggest challenge for you? Or is it on the IT side, or basically all the systems that have to work together and perhaps don't always do so? Or is it indeed all of them? And I see that you are all doing this. It's really useful because it's actually a lot more interesting to hear what your pain points are than what the statistics and claim about it. All right, very exciting. Here we go. Well, so you're speaking loudly and clearly here because talent and training seems to be really, really challenging for you. And it turns out, over 50% of you say that all of these things are challenging, and none of them are not challenging at all. That's sort of how I quickly would read the answers to this. Why may this be so? I definitely think that manufacturing is really subject to basically everything that happens in society, all the big things that are affecting the economy and that are affecting people's lives. Manufacturing is not an industry that just is immune to these things where you can sit there and innovate or do your own thing. You are consistently interacting with whatever sort of big sort of macro trend out there. And certainly workforce transformation, there obviously is 2 main challenges. You have the younger workforce and integrating them, but also benefiting from all the innovation that they do bring, but also their new attitudes. And then you, of course, have the retiring workforce and dealing with all the knowledge that they have that needs to be transferred, and orderly, basically integration of new talent in place. And then lastly, in terms of what we had looked at, certainly, moving to the cloud has been a really challenging but also exciting process for manufacturing. The fact that you now can connect machines, and many manufacturers have already connected their entire shop floor and are spreading data around about what that means to various parts of their supply chains and also to their own workforce. So, what is the human impact of global manufacturing? Well, the labor shortage is significant. In the US alone, 2.1 million unfilled manufacturing jobs. That doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. And the generational shift, is also not going anywhere. But lastly, and I think maybe importantly for this discussion in terms of augmentation, the skills gap, it's obviously not the machines that are making all the errors. If the machines are set up correctly, they don't make that many errors. But obviously, humans are prone to error, and that is partly actually what these technologies can do pretty well. Now, the Great Resignation is what it's been called, but I think we really need to work as a sector to make both the jobs more exciting and to make sure that the impression of the industry generally is positive. So this applies to people who don't even work in manufacturing. It's actually a little bit of a marketing job to avoid this or to reduce this Great Resignation trend, because it does make things more difficult, especially with new and complex technology, which we're going to get into in a second. So, overall, lean manufacturing, as I said, means different things to different people, but it's been around for a long time in the post-war era here. And productivity tracking, I'm sure you all do that in your own work lives. Empowerment is, of course, this big, elusive goal that employers will say they have to, always have a fantastic organizational culture where everyone is stimulated and wants to contribute to the company and to the shop floor. Continuous improvement, which is part of lean, ideally floats all boats, because it is something that then contributes positively across the manufacturing space. But in order to achieve that, number one, we have to deal with this tribal knowledge, because if we cannot capture what people know, we can't even design training programs, right? And especially with these expensive machines that are now on the shop floor, high turnover is not a recipe for keeping those machines running all the time. And an expensive machine that's not running is actually detrimental and probably even worse than no machine. And then you have this opportunity to do real-time data tracking. And the striking thing is, which we found at Tulip, up until now, basically, as I think you must know, if you work in manufacturing, pen and paper is still fairly prevalent. And there is, of course, nothing wrong with pen and paper. It is a fantastic set of technologies, actually. But, clipboards can get lost and things can get erased from them. And certainly the direct feedback between those who fill those out and management is not ideal. So that is actually, it sounds like it is a very, very simple problem to fix. But many of these super advanced automation technologies for very long didn't even attempt to fix that simple problem. So that is actually perhaps one mistake that has to be corrected before you move into advanced automation. And then you also have this issue that there is a lot of talent on the shop floor, but if you don't allow them to not just innovate, but you don't even allow input, that is a missed opportunity. So I think that operators on the shop floor, regardless what training or education they have, they could and should be seen as knowledge workers. However, they do need to be given enough contextual information to operate as such. And that is largely what we're going to be talking about. Lastly, in lean manufacturing, there is a big challenge of sustaining these gains that you maybe achieve early on when you start focusing on it, because it's all about culture, right? You can encourage somebody to be very supportive of the team or to innovate or to think differently, but simply focusing on tracking or even just focusing on high quality or even just trying to streamline a process may not be sustainable over time. So there are other elements that need to be brought in for this to actually be sustained. Overall, this traditional lean mindset was to fit in this lean thinking, this process thinking, into the context that there, of course, were machines coming in, and that you just had to deal with the systems that were there and then innovate within it and just try to sort of structure things more efficiently within the given. What I think we are saying, and we're not alone here, is that the human-centric perspective is actually much more effective, and it's a much more real picture of the shop floor and of the supply chain. There is no point to assume that the machines, have to be the priority and then everyone has to fit around the machine. That is actually not a recipe for sustained innovation. It's not even a recipe for sustained quality and progress. Now, shifting to this perspective is not necessarily enormously easy, because you already have certain choices that were made, perhaps. Machines are already there. So that's why we thought it was worth to talk about this in a seminar, because organizations may then approach this differently depending on how advanced they are. So let's look at what augmented lean actually means. Augmented lean is a management framework. So you might then assume that it is something that leaders should worry about. But actually, yes, number one, it is a framework that advises those who make investments. And the idea there is to use technology sparingly and to use it to augment workers and what workers are asking for, not to just blindly automate based on perhaps a case study on what might be efficiencies in other factories or such like, because many times that actually backfires. So unless you can prove in your own factory, in that particular site, that people have been asking for something, or you can see real problems right there and then, automation may actually backfire for you. In thinking about this, we developed a bunch of organizing principles that organizations can go through. And now this looks like a large list, but the thing is, every organization almost cherry picks some of these principles based on how well it fits their organization. So I'm going to just rapidly switch to looking at one aspect of this framework, which is we are really adamant that both top-down and bottom-up perspectives is what's needed to make this happen. And I'm going to use these two words, hacking and governing, to just illustrate this, because without a top-down plan, an organizational plan where leaders actually know what they think they're implementing, and they are governing whether it is physical machines or it is indeed software that's coming onto the shop floor or into the supply chain, without principles that govern what's going to happen, that's a recipe for chaos. On the other hand, if you don't immediately work on the bottom-up perspective and start allowing workers to invent ways that they can use technology in the way that they see best, then you're also in trouble. And this is actually where a lot of automation efforts fail, because they choose mostly top-down and get to the bottom-up part or never. And then it's not that they just get half the benefits. You basically don't get any benefits if you don't have both things firmly in mind. And now let's get into some of the details, because we looked recently at many companies, but here today I'm going to focus on three. So DMG Mori, Dentsply, and Stanley. Now, DMG is sort of the expert on high-end CNC machines, right? So they are into precision cuts and molds. If that's what you need, which many do, they are the ones to do it. Now, you might think, since they are the high-end player, that they had everything figured out on the digital side. Let's see. And then you have Dentsply Sirona, which is in the business of medical devices, and they have these dental implants. And likewise, one might either assume that there is absolutely no sort of digital technology here because they're actually, implants, or that they already, had these computers in place. Let's see what the situation is. And then lastly, Stanley Black & Decker, the world's biggest tool maker. Some of you are fully aware that a lot of these tools are created in a very digitized process, and many of them are even connected. But what we're going to talk about here is how Stanley themselves creates and produces these tools. The point I wanted to hammer in early on is that there is no one single augmented lean way. The whole point here is based on how different these organizations are, they do different things. They couldn't possibly do the same thing. So DMG had the challenge that most organizations have, that a lot of data was recorded simply on paper, as I mentioned early, and that makes it very hard to track. And this is a big problem for DMG Mori because their big thing is to track the return on investment on anything that shows up on their shop floor. And if you've ever been in any of their factories or indeed looked at their machines, you will see that they are all about precision. But no surprise to me, they had a lot of the same problems that you all just stated you have and that we just went through. They have training needs. They had a lot of tribal knowledge that was stuck somewhere. And they didn't actually have real-time data tracking of everything that went on their own shop floors. So even though their machines, when they came out, were very advanced and allowed other people to track a bunch of things, the production of that machine was not optimized. Now, the important thing is they couldn't just launch an enormous effort here without talking to their workers. So even though the overall approach here was to go for scale, they even began pretty slowly, and they started with the train-the-trainer approach. So they wanted to learn what the problems were before they invested. They wanted the solutions to emerge from within the organization rather than buying a full-fledged solution that then everybody just had to deal with. And then they built it from there. So that was their approach. Empower the shop floor operators to make decisions, but don't launch this as an enormous global framework without checking with the workers before they did it. And in this whole process, they kept it pretty organized, and everything that indeed went on when it comes to software technology to track operations on the shop floor was in accordance with what the workers wanted. And they kept it simple as possible. Dentsply, with their implants, had actually quite a bit of digital technology already. So they were in a very different situation. They were not trying to digitize from scratch. So there, what happened was their one digital champion who actually launched this particular operations change, he went about really slowly making these changes, did not pick 50 use cases, picked one, then checked how that was going, picked another strategic use case, and then slowly kind of just fixed the few problems that really were left. So, when you are investing in digital technology that is flexible, it can actually work within an established digital context. And this is not always the case, but it was something that Dentsply had to consider, because they already had made previous sort of sunk investment costs into existing digital technology. But at the end of it, because they rolled it out so strategically and slowly, they also were able to achieve buy-in with their workers because they saw problems that they had thought long and hard about, why these things were still there. And number one on the Dentsply side was actually to reduce the cognitive load, because when you're producing these implants, there are an enormous amount of details involved in getting every aspect personalized and obviously at a mass scale. So here, the operators were already dealing with lots of digital screens, and the case here was to simplify. So simplification, is really, and work instructions that tell these operators exactly what's going on, making them focus on what they're supposed to be doing instead of figuring out what they need to be doing. So here again, the learning aspect was very important, and decentralizing it across the organization and letting them figure out exactly how they could deploy it. And then obviously at the end of the day, respecting the existing investments and the organizational system that these technology apps went into was really important. Lastly, with Stanley, the challenge there was actually that, Stanley is such a large organization. They have such an enormous ecosystem of suppliers. But even for them, who also have been investing in digital technology for a while, training the internal champions became the most important thing before they could do anything else. So Stanley went about and created basically a small set of people that knew what was going on and started sharing the experiences they had with new digital apps. And then they enabled basically citizen developers across different factories. I myself went to one of their factories up here in Massachusetts and experienced how one of their quality managers basically went to town on the changes that she saw, but she didn't do it just because she saw it and then didn't communicate with the floor. I spoke to several workers that she had talked to before they implemented any kind of new screens, because she wanted to double check that this was actually needed. And then once the shop floor workers were able to see that data, now they're seeing the bigger picture. So now they're actually equipped to innovate. And this is important because we were talking about knowledge workers a second ago. You can't be a knowledge worker unless you're trusted to see some of the data that emerges. So that was the journey that Stanley had to be on. They had to trust these workers to see some of the data, and only then can they actually realistically innovate. So there's also a lot of trust involved. But once they organized themselves and had their own internal champions, they are now rolling out these digital apps all across their sites in a very, very high speed, but not technologies that are made by others. These are apps that are mostly proven by their own citizen developers. And Sophia Baran was one of those that I was just talking about a second ago. So she sees, endless opportunity, but picked a few things and talked to Oscar here, who's pictured on the CTO, about, the apps that she implemented. And the mix in the framework is that she and Stanley is very, very focused on the bottom-up aspect. So allowing their own workers to kind of hack their way through the side, both at the shop floor level and at the manager and engineer level that Sophia represents. But then the overall framework follows very, very clear architecture guidelines because they are, an enormous company across the world. So even though it has to emerge and cannot just be, tread down and everyone just told what to do, it is a mix of hacking and governance that is Stanley's recipe. So I have very quickly gone through some of the aspects of this framework. It's importantly both top-down and bottom-up, and many of these kind of abstract principles in the middle, they have kind of a management aspect, and then they have you might call it a worker aspect, but it's of course an organization is much more complicated. And today in my presentation, I'm sort of looking at organizations in almost like three levels: managers, engineers and sort of doers who have knowledge about the organization and are implementing changes, and then the operator level that are executing many of the actions. But of course, in a more futuristic context, we need all of these operators to also be innovators. And that's when they start to pick on some of these other actions there in the middle. Now, how can we make this shift? How can you make this shift? And how big of a shift do you really think it is in your workplace? I'm sort of curious. Basically, if you are on the managing side, if you are on the executive side, do that Gamba Walk before you invest in tech. Don't just look at all of the theoretical studies that say that other factories, other companies have achieved X amount of efficiencies. That's actually a recipe for disaster. Now you are maybe creating a very good business case, and maybe you can even get the budget approvals, but you might be investing in the wrong technologies, and the technology may be wonderful for a year, but you are, of course, stuck with it, because these investments very quickly become sunk costs. So I would say the direct message here from this type of thinking is that you need to do many, many more Gamba walks before investing, even if you think you can get the budget for a technology. If you then look at it from the engineer point of view, and it's important to me to state that engineer is obviously a title and a protected one, but it's also a mindset. In the contemporary manufacturing organization, we are going to need many more people with engineering mindsets than we have true engineers. We are going to have to educate people. We are going to have to train people at such a fast clip. And in order for that to be possible, the technologies cannot be such that you need to ask permission from management for every change. You need to ask the IT department to enable you to do, basically, you're just as an engineer suggesting things, but the IT department has to not just approve it, but they actually have to execute it. What we're suggesting here is that an app-based approach, ideally no code, or if you're an engineer that can code, that's wonderful. But the point is, I don't think the future of manufacturing has time for these solutions where you're always sitting and waiting for that other business function, whether it is the budget function, the leadership function, or indeed the IT department. So that's the challenge on the engineering side, to both find these technologies, argue for them, and then to actually embrace them and use them, because they are not without complexity, even though they are no code. They do take a bit of a mindset shift. And then on the operator side, on the front lines, on the true front lines, I think the message from my side is that one does indeed have to be ready to learn at every opportunity. And it doesn't really matter what education or not you started with, right? But there's also a message up towards the management chain. You actually need to tell people that if I don't get training, this is an unacceptable job. You have to demand clear job descriptions. And with these, app-based approaches, these job descriptions need to be digitized, and they need to show up just in time as you are doing your job. So the message here is, I think the workforce will also start to expect a lot more. It's not like you can just hire 50 workers and just put them on something, unless the job is very, very clearly explained, and unless when people enter into difficulty, that there is an immediate fix of a digital prompt type of nature that shows up and helps people. Because I don't think we can afford, as we emerge here with these 2.1 million open jobs, we can't sit there and then hire people and then actually train them, in separate sessions. A lot of the training, a lot of the basic training at least, has to actually be on the job as people are doing the job that they were asked to do. So what does all of this mean? And I realize I haven't sought your input for a while, and I'm now really curious to hear what you're thinking. Whatever you are doing here, if you're trying to be augmented lean, I think what I'm saying is, this is not some massive master plan. You need to think in brief sprints, think about actions that can be executed really quickly, and you have to allow the flexibility of people who think differently, who want to sort of hack the system, have suggestions that maybe you didn't think of. That is really what disruptive change means, and that's also how you're going to get the benefits of asking everybody in the organization to submit the way that they want to do things. And the important thing is not to lose control, because if it cannot scale, then all of these innovations, all of this these allowances that the new types of software lets you do stops you from scaling. So you can think in sprints, but you have to plan still as if you are back in kind of an enterprise mindset. The other thing is on the training side. As I said, I don't think training as we move into the next 3 to 5 to 7 years really is going to be what we think of it as. You certainly cannot send people to college for 4 years, right? We just don't have the time to do that. So real life training in the moment is going to be the dominant type of training. And that is very demanding for our workplace. It's very demanding for the systems. And it's also very demanding for the trainers, those who are responsible perhaps for the work instructions or for introducing changes, which happen all the time. So you need to make sure that the entire workforce and the systems, importantly, are ready to adapt in this way. What that means is basically rethinking technology. There are certain technologies that are so complex, and it doesn't have to be robots. It can be, other types of technology where the interface is so complex that what we have been talking about for the last few minutes is not possible. If you can't get real-time data very easily out of this technology, if you need to train for 3 months to even understand how to operate it, maybe it's not suited. Maybe you need to go back to the manufacturer and complain. Either way, shiny machines need to fit in to the manufacturing job situation and not the other way around. And lastly, we are trying to build a community of people who think this way, who have maybe grown up with Lean, but are realizing that just slapping digital and automation on top of Lean doesn't necessarily get you where you want to be. Now, the stuff that I've been talking about here may sound very, very simple, but as I think if you work in any real manufacturing organization today, the things that I kind of just list off, many of those things are not happening. And if you don't do these things, you are probably working in an inefficient organization that's heading for problems. So that's really what I wanted to say before. I'm really curious to hear if you have questions, because we have, Natan, Linder, and I have written a book on this called Augmented Lean, where we are trying to explain what this framework means for us, what it has meant for Tulip clients, and a bunch of other experts that we interviewed over a whole year. These are academics on studying Lean, these are practitioners, these are members of companies such as the 3 that we went through today, from Dentsply and Stanley to DMG Mori. So if you want to know more about this, there's basically 2 ways to do that. You can read the book, which is coming out in October, or you can already go on the Augmented podcast, where a lot of the interviews are already available, and you can see for yourself, see if you can get some concrete strategies both for scaling and for matching kind of the bottom up and top down, which is, we think, needed for the next generation of technology to really reach its potential. And with that, I wanted to see if we can get some questions from you. I'm super curious to hear what you think about this. Was it all simple? Have you heard this before? Is it happening in your organization, or do you see any challenges here? Let me know.
Thanks, Tran. So to start off, you addressed this a little bit up front, but had a few more questions on it. Just how Lean and automation are connected, and how do you know what the right level of automation is versus augmented Lean?
Well, exactly. That's the core of the challenge. It's a great question, because what is the appropriate level of automation? It's actually it must be a very clever person asking, because it's impossible to answer, right, in the abstract. But the point is, if you don't think very carefully about what the appropriate level of automation is for your company, then you have sort of committed fallacy number 1. You have already lost. There is no such thing as we have to automate. The problem is these Industry 4.0 gurus that talk about, the promises of automation technologies have been almost far too successful, because clearly it's very easy to get enamored, whether it is with, robots, or it is with very, very expensive precision machinery. But it's far more difficult to really prove that it's going to impact your own factory or workplace positively. You almost have to prove that to yourself first. So I don't know if the question can be stated in a way that I can kind of answer it more precisely, but the first question to ask is exactly this: what is the appropriate amount of automation? And I would say the minimum automation needed is the answer. Because over automation, there are only a very, very few use cases, and far fewer than the industry sort of pundits claim, where this whole 24/7 fully automated is even an ideal. And there's one important reason that I think, why this isn't the ideal. People who say this have not thought about really deeply that humans are still the best innovators. So what you're going for, even if you have those initial efficiencies, and they might even last for years, but the problem is if you fully automate and you haven't built in this perspective of asking humans what's next, you're in for trouble when the industry shifts, when the technology changes, or any other kind of macro thing happens, in the demand cycle.
You talked about empowering employees and the importance of decentralization. Can anybody be a citizen developer, and is there a certain amount of training that's needed to get up to speed?
I want to say that everyone could be a citizen developer, but I'll tell you right off the bat that some people can't. And the people who can't are the people who refuse to. If you know what I mean? It's like if you refuse to try certain foods, you're not going to like those foods, only because you haven't tried them. So that's kind of stating the obvious. I have come across people who are resisting this notion that they should dabble with, technology at that level. I think it's a very real challenge. I don't want to hide the fact that even if no-code technology and apps seems like a very, very easy and much easier way to look at technology than what you might have been used to before, there's no denying that there is a little bit of a learning curve for everybody. And of course, it depends what your preparation is. If you are an IT engineer educated 20 years ago, there is definitely a little learning curve. But if you are a fresh graduate in some topic, you could be an engineer, you could be a business major, you could maybe just come out of community college having studied whatever it is, a very practical subject. That learning curve is much, much smaller because, and not as steep, because you generally have lived in society, right? So you have an iPhone or some cell phone, you have a smartphone of some sort, and you are used to using consumer applications that are demanding this kind of interaction. But the only thing really that a citizen developer at the very basic level needs is, an understanding of basic business logic, right? This leads to that. And you have to take into account, obviously, the context. So if you, are working in a regulated environment, it's not like being a citizen developer, doesn't entail learning anything. You have to keep all of those things in mind. But I would say a citizen developer means a perspective where a lot more people than think they could be a software developer now have the chance to be true developers that are creating apps that are simplifying very unnecessarily complex processes on the shop floor, for sure.
So you gave a lot of great examples of some major companies putting the process to work. What about smaller manufacturers who may not have the wherewithal or resources of Stanley Black & Decker or DMG? How does Augmented Lean fit into that business plan?
Well, the great thing here, and it's an aspect we didn't have time to cover so much, but with cloud, which I alluded to in the beginning, and some of you said was, was an issue, or is something that is relevant to you. The business models of software as a service, suddenly became a reality. Meaning, you don't necessarily have to do what you did in the past, which is make this enormous kind of $100,000 commitment to a license and stuff like that. Many of the app-based software technologies and integrations are available to try for free, and then you can dip your toe into it, and then if you like it, you can try it for a month, and the price is fairly reasonable. So this, I think, makes a very good case for smaller companies innovating at a faster clip, because you can try these things and you can check how it works, with your context. And if it works well, then you can subscribe to these technologies and platforms. And if it doesn't, at least you have not made that sunk investment in a massive license fee that already has annoyed your workers because they had to change the way they were doing a lot of different things. So I think the experimentation aspect of it really should appeal to smaller companies.
Okay, I'm going to combine a couple of questions here. One talks about tribal knowledge, which you mentioned earlier, and the fact that it's compounding with the Great Resignation and people just switching jobs more frequently. So, how do you mitigate those effects? But also, as you're doing that, and one particular listener said that they're in the process of transitioning from paper to automation and have a big digitalization project in the works at a steep rate, but not necessarily the right people in place to get it done. What's the answer on that side?
Well, first of all, I think if you are doing a digital transformation project, you have to prepare your own organization for it. So you have to have people on the inside that if they don't understand everything about it, no one can, they at least have some experience with digitization and digitalization. The biggest mistake actually is to trust everybody from the outside. So not only is the problem that you may have to buy a big license from a company where you kind of have to take wholesale whatever solution they're giving you, but the problem with trusting third parties, whether they are consultants or systems integrators, 100%. And, by the way, these groups of people, and many of you might work for some of them here in the audience, there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to really be very careful if you are inside of an organization the person in the question here is undergoing a digital transformation. And the number one problem I would say in this situation is to take everything that you're served up so that either you are not tailoring it to your own organization, or you might just sort of take all of it, and yes, you might get a lot of initial benefits, but the costs are that you have to adapt, and now you're dependent on a third party for implementation. So we are not saying in Augmented Lean that digital transformation is easy. We are saying it's part of a much larger transformation, which is becoming human-centric. It just happens to have an augmentation layer on top of it, only that it's not a layer. It's actually, when it's done well, it's an extension of what we already are doing. So long answer to a short question, but it is going to be complex. Whatever you do, don't try to sort of innovate without tackling the problem your own way. I hope that it goes some way in answering the question.
Wait, here's another short question. How does Augmented Lean fit with additive manufacturing?
Well, I mean, generally, I think the principle fits very well. The idea that that you're adding instead of cutting, is very much an Augmented Lean principle, if you know what I mean. The whole process in additive is of course a contemporary type process. So, even the way that it's conceived and the way that it allows for, theoretically at least, a lot more people to give input to the design stage of the production of something, that certainly fits the perspective. Now, additive is many, many things these days, right? It is printing things, and it depends on the materials, and it depends on what you're doing, whether it's at small, precision scale or enormous scale. So generally, I think the principle of augmented lean work across manufacturing. They should work in any specialty of manufacturing. I wouldn't say, however, that these principles are being practiced everywhere. We had to look a little bit, under the hood here to find the companies that really are representing, emerging ways of being augmented lean. It's not, a given that a company that operates, in an advanced technology space or perhaps supplies additive manufacturing products, they are not necessarily by definition augmented lean. So it's important here that this is not something where we're not trying to label companies anyway. It is a mindset, and it's an ever-changing mindset.
So sometimes when you're empowering people, you're putting them outside of their comfort zone or knowledge base. How have you seen, what successes have you seen in training line level employees to think more like an engineer?
Well, if you take Oscar there, who was the example in the Stanley Black & Decker use case, and the reason I can even say his name is he's part of a video that I was part of shooting, actually. When I talk to him, and he is an operator, he is, part of bending metal to create these wonderful sort of tools and boxes that you can organize your garage with if you have a very advanced car shop, or you are a professional collector of cars, or whatever it is you want to what order in your garage. What he seems to be experiencing with these augmented lean practices that he got access to is that he is more inspired in his work, he makes less mistakes, and he feels like he was listened to, because Sophia walked around, she talked to him, she said, "Oscar, I'm thinking of something here that I hope can make your work day a little bit easier. What are some of the things that you are struggling with?" And one of the things very precisely he was struggling with was awareness of what happened right before he was bending his metal part, and what was happening right after. And also with tracking the quality of the work that he was doing in real time. So when he discovered that these apps that Sophia put in place gave him a lot more real-time insight into how he could fit better in and how he could excel. Of course, that's exciting. And he had no particular training outside of the very deep expertise he has in the highly specific action and the role that he has on the factory floor.
So things are moving faster and faster these days with the various challenges and demands put on companies and individuals. In adapting technology on the fly, how do you maintain control on the processes that standardization provides?
Well, so a lot of things are happening on the fly. That's true. And it's actually even an advantage, right? That's partly, the hacking part of our framework is that you need to adjust to that. It's a reality, and you should even encourage that things happen on the fly. But like you pointed out, the top-down aspect of standardization is important. You cannot launch a new automation effort. You cannot sustain it over time unless it's very clear what the boundaries are. So you may, for example, at the plant level, allow any plant quality manager to suggest, here is an app for tracking time of people coming in, or here's an app for tracking the quality of this particular process, or here are some digital work instructions that we have created that we think are valid, for everybody who has X role. Now, you can allow people to standardize based on that, and that could be a good thing, but to force everyone to then pick, for example, Sophia's new app and do that at all, 200 factories, in Stanley Black & Decker, that would not necessarily be the right thing to do. On the other hand, if it comes to something very, very basic, which goes to tracking a metric that Stanley Black & Decker or any of these three companies I was talking about needs for their enterprise-wide innovation efforts, then of course, standardizing how it's going to be measured, when it's going to be measured, what level of employee needs to measure it, which machines need to produce this kind of information, and then getting that straight into the corporate deck or the corporate sort of machine where you want to analyze that further, that becomes really important. And there are a lot of standards in the formal sense of standard, like IT standards as well, that start to matter. And on the cloud side, there are a bunch of standards that you just have to follow. Otherwise, the information is not going to flow from machine A to machine B, and certainly not to your desk where you're sitting trying to analyze these things.
Right. Well, we're getting nearly out of time, but still have some questions. I'm going to try to combine a couple here, several on training. One, that training departments have dwindled in size and effectiveness. How do you combat that? As well as how critical was the consulting training aspect versus technology alone in the examples you listed with Black & Decker and DMG? And finally, app-based activities, what exactly do you mean by that? And any practical examples that you can share?
Well, let me handle that first. So I've used, and apologies for doing that, I've used sort of app-based technologies very loosely, and I should have defined it much more clearly. What I'm talking about is, at the very, very simple level, I'm just talking about the fact that, with the digital interface, there's a lot of data flowing from machines. Machines, deep down in these machines, they are counting basically everything that happens. Whatever a machine is doing these days, there is a digital counterpart that logs the activity of that machine. And this now, with these apps that are basically the digital corollary of this, you can now map what a human being does too, using sensors perhaps that are locking into, maybe it's a camera that looks down on the desk, and with certain configurations, and combining that together. Certainly the Tulip apps can then track what a human being is doing and say, you put something in box A instead of in box B. And we have created apps for that. We have hundreds of these apps, either created by us for examples, and then the companies are implementing different ways of doing it, whether it's tracking an action they're already doing, whether it is getting a specific type of data out of a machine and then sending it to specific people, or it could even be along the supply chain. For example, you're saying, well, let me know with a message or a light or an email that something has been shipped. Something as simple as that. And all of these things can be called apps. Once they are in a system and you have shared them with a certain amount of people inside of your company, you have created an app that actually executes that action in digital form and creates a record for it and shows it to somebody. That's essentially an app. So it can be many, many different things. The most basic level of an app, for us, we started with the pen and paper problem. So we basically built some very easy digital work instructions. And that, when it shows up at the right time for someone who is doing something, is an app. And I think people have a very intuitive understanding of an app if you have a smartphone, right? Because the apps are basically simplified, digitized actions that you can take, and that typically show up, in our consumer lives on a device. And in the workplace, if you are allowed, it shows up on a device. And if not, it perhaps shows up on a screen, maybe ideally a mobile screen, but it could show up, on the computer, on a desktop computer. It doesn't matter where you send these messages, but that's kind of what I mean by apps. The other question, I think, was a little hard to answer in 2 seconds, Sam. So if you want to summarize it one more time, the first part of that question.
Revolved around training. First off, and companies don't necessarily have the resources to train workers anymore or do it effectively. And also how important were outside consultants and training in terms of implementing with the examples you listed.
Yeah, so I mean, on the training side, I would say, yes, training is a massive issue, and there's no one simple fix for training, right? We're going to need it from everywhere. You're going to need consultants to train. You're going to have to bring in outside coaches and trainers. You're going to have to do train-to-trainer efforts where your internal staff are training everybody else. And then individually, whether you are an operator, an engineer, or a manager, you have to train yourself. And you have to seek out training before you're asked to do it and before the monthly sort of training requirement. I think training just is a misnomer for learning. And I think training, honestly, as a word is a little bit convoluted because it's something that these days is not optional. And it's also not just what you think of as compulsory. It's somewhere in between. Training has to just happen all the time. You have to seek out training. You have to look at examples. You have to just look around you, pick up whatever is happening because things change very fast. It's not like you're never done with this training. And if you see it as a chore, now you're in trouble at whatever level you are, right? And we have to train each other. You train up, you train down. The hierarchy, you can't sit there and assume that as a manager, you are training everybody else. There are people and resources in your organization that are going to need to train you and everyone else all the time. So I think the whole mindset for what training is generally just has to change into training is everywhere. And we need to be incented to train. We need to think of it as a positive, good thing. We need far better ways to be trained. And universities is only, and colleges are only one way to achieve it. There's digital training, there's hybrid training. Training is essentially everywhere, and the costs need to go down, and the time we spend on it, I think, is going to go up. But the biggest worry I would have is that we think of it as a box. Training is a big thing. It's an activity. Training, for me, is something you just simply have to do all the time.
Certainly no shortage of new information coming out, and ongoing training and learning is definitely a must, and also a good way to close the webinar. Thanks again for joining us, Trond.
Yeah, and thank you to everybody who listened. Thank you so much.
Sure. And as you've shown today, lean manufacturing is even more relevant today in the wake of changing manufacturing and workforce dynamics, but with a few new wrinkles or augmentations to further improve efficiency and reduce waste. Thank you for joining us on this SME Media webinar. We hope you found it informative and that you'll join us for future webinars.